Hello, welcome to lesson 3.2, which is in Unit 3, Lists and Tuples. And this one, we're going to look at looping through a list, being able to print out every option or every item that is stored in that list sequentially. In the previous lesson, we looked at creating a list and accessing individual items in that list, either from the beginning or the end. But this one we're going to look at looping through. Here is an example, and I believe this one is also on the first lesson there. It has a list of students. There's 3 students in there, and then it uses a specific statement or a specific syntax to print out the students in order. And it says for each student, well, not each, but it says for student in students. So the variable for the list is called students. And so each individual student in here, each individual part of that item, of that list, is going to be pulled out as a student. And for that student, it's going to say hello, and then it's going to print the student with a capital letter and an exclamation point. So this is one of the most important concepts related to lists. So you can have a list with 1 million items in it, and in 3 lines of code, you can write a sentence for every one of those 1 million items. If you want to understand lists and become a competent programmer, make sure you take the time to understand this section. We use a loop to access all the elements in the list. A loop is a block of code that represents itself until it runs out of items to work with, or until a certain condition is met. In this case, our loop will run once for every item in our list. With a list that is 3 items long, the loop is going to run 3 times. So we can look at how we access the list and the items in the list, and then try to understand how that whole process works. So here is an example very similar to what we had to begin with. And in this example, I have a list of dogs. And the list of dogs has 3 dogs in it, 3 different kinds of dog, breeds of dog. And the loop is going to say for dog. So it's going to pull out each one of these individually. For each dog in the list dogs, you're going to print out whatever that is. So this will run. It'll jump in here. It'll take the first one. It's going to print that dog out. Then it's going to loop over, and it says, okay, do I have another one? Yep, there's one more here. Okay, you're going to take that name, put it back into the variable dog, and then we're going to print that dog out. Then it's going to jump back up to the top again, say, is there another one? And then, yep, does the same thing. Is there another one? No, there's nothing past the third option or the second item in the list, the position number 2. The third item in the list, there's nothing past that. So when it sees that, it jumps out of the list and continues on to the next part of the code, whatever that may be. So the keyword for right here tells Python to get ready to use a loop. The variable dog with no S on it, so just a singular dog, is a placeholder variable. It's a variable that Python uses and will place every item in that list into that placeholder variable one at a time. The first time through the loop, the value of dog will be Border Collie. The second time, it's going to be Australian Cattle Dog, and the third time, it'll be Labrador Retriever. And since there are no more dogs after that, the loop will stop. There's a website called pythontutor.com, and it allows you to run Python code 1 line at a time. So you can hit step by step, go through this line and watch it develop this list of 3 items. Then you hit next, and it jumps down to this one, and so it says find this dog, and it stores Border Collie into the variable dog, and then it prints the dog on the next line. So it's a very neat way of looking at the code, and so you can copy your code into pythontutor.com and test that out. Make sure that it works as you would expect it to work. So we can do whatever we want with the value of dog inside the loop. In this case, we just print out the name where we say print dog. But if we want to use it in a string, I can say I like dog and then have an S joined to that as well. So it said I like border collies. I like Australian cattle dogs. I like Labrador retrievers, and it'll print that statement 3 times. Inside and outside of the loop, the Python uses indentation to decide what is inside of a loop and what is outside of a loop. So you can see that this right here, because of this indentation and everything's on the same line, these 2 items are part of this for loop to loop through the dogs list. When we get down here to this last one, the indentation, there's no tab or no extra space there at the beginning of this line. And so this one, when it gets through, it'll print all of these dogs. It'll do these 2 statements for these 3 dogs. And then once it gets done with that, it jumps down to the next line in the code, which is this one. And so you will, even though there are 3 strings here, and if this one was tabbed over, it would print all 3 every single time. But because the indentation is only applied to these 2 lines, these are the only 2 lines that are going to run inside the loop. When it gets to the next line, it says, whoop, I have to go back up to the for loop and run this again until there are no more dogs, and then it jumps down to this next line. In here they used a new line at the end, and what that does is that allows the code to have an extra space between each of these prints. So instead of having it one on top of another, it'll print these 2 lines together, and then it'll have a blank space, and then it'll print those 2 lines again and then have another blank space. And then this one actually does a double blank space because it gets one here and then it gets another one right there. And so just to demonstrate that, we'll pull this up and we're going to create a new file. And I want to type, well, actually I'm going to copy this. And we'll paste it in here. And you can see that it colorizes the different parts of this this code. And it looks like it got my strings correct this time as well. So I'm going to hit save. I come up here. Hopefully it's in my unit 3. It is not. Python. Nope. I did this last time too. Unit 3. And this one is called 3.2. List. I guess I could have left that on there. Loops. Loops. Save. And so then when I try and run this module, it's going to come through, and you can see that it has that extra space. Because of this new line at the end, it's going to do a new line, and then the next time it's going to print the next print on the next line. So we get an extra space in there. And then this last one, because there are 2 new lines in a row, it's going to have a double extra space there. So just a little bit of formatting to make the code easier to read, or the output easier to read. The other thing we can do is we can use the index value wherever that is located in the list. And so when I run this one, this is going to have the code keep track of the item, the index number for each item for you. So we could have one that we are using the list.index and then value, whatever that is, every single time. But this enumerate function is going to track the item for you. So instead of having to do that in an extra line of code and keeping track of that and adding 1 every single time, this is going to look at the index value and the dog. So it'll look at, in the case of the border collie, it'll be index 0, and then it's going to also find out the name of the the dog, whatever dog that is, a border collie, and it's going to use both of those pieces of information when it does the dogs list. And in this case, it's going to use a str, which is a string. It's going to turn a number into a string for the index value, whatever number that is. And it's going to say place, and whatever that is, whatever index value that is, it's going to place 1 is dog, and then whatever that dog is. So it's going to keep track of those numbers for you. And so again, I would, as you go through this code, I would suggest hitting pause now and going and trying this code and making sure that it works and that it works for you and that you understand how it is working. So I'm going to come back up here. So this is my list of dogs. You can see that I have my index value. It's going to look for index, whatever number that is. It's also going to look for the dog, whatever dog is in the list, the name of the dog. It's going to save that index value into a variable called place, and then it's going to use the print statement place, and then whatever number that is, and then dog, whatever the dog name is. And it correctly closes that print statement right there. So when I hit save and run, you'll see that place 0 is dog border collie, place 1 dog Australian cattle dog, and place 2 dog Labrador retriever. Remember, the place, we always start with 0 in a list, and so the place number is the first item in the list always is a 0. And so even though we have 3 items, we only have up to 2. It's 1 less than the number in the list. And we could always do this right here. This is the next bit of code, and what that does is that has us do an index plus 1, which is going to take whatever index value, place 0, and add 1 to it. So place 1, place 2, place 3. If I run this one again, you'll see this time it says place 1, 2, and 3. So the first item, second item, and third item. And it is also using the title case at the end, which is going to capitalize each word in the variable as it's being printed out. The common error here is it's a very, very common one inside loops. When you ask for a dog and dogs, but then you print out the list item, which is dogs, and what this does is this will print out the entire list of items, whatever those are. And so if you have 1,000,000 items, it's going to print out 1,000,000 items. And let's just run this one. I'll show you what it does. Oh, I'm trying to move spaces around. There we go. So when I comment this one out and save and run this module, you'll see that it does the list, and you can see it has the square brackets and everything because it's printing out for each dog. There's 3 items in here, so it's going to go through each of those 3 items, but it's going to print out the list on each one of those items instead of the actual item that you're looking for. So just understand that if you see an error such as this, you're actually printing out the list, and you need to look at whatever your print statement is or your output to the display. Make sure that you have the correct variable in here. If I change and just remove that one little s and hit save, now this program will run correctly, and you'll see that it has all 3 dogs listed individually. All right, so for the practice problems for this section, you're going to need to create a new file, and it's going to be titled the same as the other ones, your last name, and then Python 3.2 list looping. And in this file, we're going to create 3 problems, and if you have any of the practice stuff from up above, you might have that on there as well. But practice problem number 1 is going to be looping through list items. So you're going to create a new list that has 5 items. You're going to use a for loop, as we did in the very first example, to loop through each item using the position in the list. So you'll start, if you have a list of dogs, you'll say for dog in dogs, and then you will have a print. Oops, I didn't go up high enough. There we go. For dog in dogs, print and then something about the dog, or you can just print and then have dog, and you have each of the things down there, each of the items down there. So you're just looping through the 5 items to make sure that you're printing out all 5. The next practice problem, you're going to create a list that has 5 items. You're going to print an initial statement that says something before the loop starts. You're going to print each item in a sentence. So if you have 5 colors in a list, you might print out a statement that says my favorite color is, and then concatenate or join each item using the for loop, each item from that list. And so it might say my favorite color is yellow, and then the next line, my favorite color is blue, my favorite color is purple, my favorite color is red and green. And at the end of each print statement, you're going to have a new line, the /n, so you should have a blank space between each one of the output statements. And then at the very end, outside the list, you're going to have one last statement that says something else. So you'll have a print at the top. You're going to use a for loop to loop through all the items in the list, and you're going to print out a sentence with each of those. And at the very end, you'll have another statement that says, here is the end of my list, or whatever, just something. But remember that the for loop is distinguished, and you can tell that it's inside the loop because of the indentation. So the for loop and then the indentation is going to be the part that prints off inside that loop. And as soon as you're done with the loop, you bring it back over to the left side, and you're going to have your lines line up out there, and that just means that it's back out of that loop. Problem number 3 is to enumerate a list item. And so this is very similar to the last part here, where you're going to have a list of items, 5 items. You're going to print an initial statement, and then you're going to loop through using the index value and the item in the list, and you're going to use the enumerate function to make sure that you are keeping track of each of those items with the index and the item, and you're going to have a statement of some sort out in your program that tells what index place it is, what location in the list it is, as well as what the item is. So you're going to do something very similar to that one. So these 3 we've done up above. I walked you through those earlier, and so you can use those as examples. You can copy that code and then add to it and modify it. I don't want to see the exact same thing, but you can modify that code, and you have the ability to make your own looping lists if you'd like to. But if you do have any questions, please let me know.